Hey, thanks for clicking on my video. If this video helps you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. It is greatly appreciated and it really helps. Let's get to the video. Hello everyone, let's talk about some characteristics of tangent and cotangent functions. So we're not going to graph any in this video, we're just going to talk about or basically look at the parent function for each tangent and cotangent. And then in the videos following, we'll talk about how to actually graph tangent and cotangent and perform some operations on them. So first of all, we know that tangent of x would be equal to sine of x divided by cosine of x. And so because of this, we need to take into account some undefined values for our denominator. And that's going to be when cosine of x is equal to 0. And so we know that because we can't divide by 0. So now when we think about cosine of x equaling 0, this is going to be at values that are like positive and negative pi over 2, and also odd multiples of those values. Okay, so we'll take a look at our graph in just a second. So now, when we look down at our graph and also the table of values at the top, we see some values for x and we see the output with our parent function for y equals tangent of x. So we start off, we have negative pi over 2, and then we're going to positive pi over 2. And notice we have a couple points here, negative pi over 4, negative 1, 0, 0, and then pi over 4, positive 1, with some values in between those as well. So that's going to tell us that our period, or when our graph begins to repeat its pattern, is going to just be pi. So we actually have three separate sections here on this graph. Notice that here at negative pi over 2 and pi over 2, we have asymptotes. Those are going to be these two asymptotes right here, negative pi over 2 and pi over 2. And we said that those asymptotes are going to repeat at odd multiples of pi over 2. So here we see another one at negative 3 pi over 2 and also positive 3 pi over 2. So now we see, okay, let's look at just the section in the middle. So we have 0, 0, we have pi over 4, 1, and we have negative pi over 4, negative 1. And then we just follow those points to make our tangent graph. So the graph is going to approach those asymptotes, both going to positive infinity and negative infinity. Okay, so this is what our tangent graph would look like. And now let's take a look at cotangent. So now going down to cotangent, we see that cotangent would be cosine of x over sine of x. So kind of following that same pattern, denominator can't be 0. So for values where sine of x equals 0, that's going to be multiples of pi, we're going to have asymptotes at those values. So here we see negative pi. We would have also another asymptote at the y-axis, positive pi, and also 2 pi, and then that would continue as well. So once again, for cotangent, our period is just pi. So until it just takes pi units for the graph to begin repeating its pattern. And we see some values here, pi over 2, pi over 2, 0. Then we have pi over 4, positive 1. And we have another point that we can use right here to make our graph. Okay. So once again, period is pi. That pattern is going to repeat, so on and so forth as we go. So now in this video, we're focusing on just some characteristics of these graphs. Like I said, in subsequent videos on the channel, we'll graph and look more in depth about these. But for right now, just talking about characteristics of tangent and cotangent. So here in white, we have some characteristics for tangent. Yellow is cotangent, and then black will apply to both tangent and cotangent. So the domain of y equals tangent of x is going to be all real numbers except odd multiples of pi over 2. So if we go back to our tangent graph, odd multiples, or all real numbers except odd multiples of pi over 2, and that is where our asymptotes lie. Okay. All right, now for domain of cotangent of x, all real numbers except multiples of pi, and once again, that's where we saw our asymptotes being for cotangent. Okay. Now the range of both functions are all real numbers, and so because of this, our graph's going to go up forever, it's going to go down forever, and this also means that we are not going to have a maximum, we will not have a minimum. Therefore, we also don't have an amplitude, which we saw for sine and cosine graphs. The period of both functions is pi. That's what we saw when they start to repeat its pattern. It just takes pi units. Then the x-intercepts. The x-intercepts for y equals tangent of x are going to be x equals 0, positive and negative pi, positive and negative 2 pi, 3 pi, so on and so forth. So here we had an x-intercept at 0, negative pi, positive pi. Then we would have negative 2 pi, positive 2 pi. That pattern would repeat. And lastly, the x-intercepts for cotangent are going to be positive and negative pi over 2, positive and negative 3 pi over 2, 5 pi over 2, 7 pi over 2, and that's what we see right here. So pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, negative pi over 2, and that would repeat as well. Okay, so those are some characteristics on things we need to remember and know about the graphs for y equals tangent of x and y equals cotangent of x.